There is a certain kind of man who cannot be easily moved. The world may become loud around him, people may misunderstand him, life may test him through loss, loneliness, pressure, or uncertainty, yet something within him remains steady. He does not need the crowd to approve of him before he acts. He does not collapse when things fail to go his way. He does not spend his life chasing comfort, attention, or permission. His strength is quieter than that. It is found in the way he carries himself when no one is watching, in the standards he refuses to abandon, in the silence he can endure without running from himself. This is the path of the unshakable man. To become unshakable is to stop being ruled by every passing emotion, every external judgment, every small disturbance that pulls ordinary people away from themselves. Most people live as if their inner world belongs to whatever happens around them. A harsh word ruins their day. A setback makes them question their worth. A moment of loneliness convinces them something is wrong. Their peace is constantly being handed over to the world, piece by piece, until there is almost nothing left that truly belongs to them. The unshakable man begins differently. He slowly learns to take back what he has given away: his attention, his discipline, his purpose, his reactions, his solitude. He begins to understand that a man who cannot govern himself will always be governed by something else. Marcus Aurelius, Miyamoto Musashi, and Friedrich Nietzsche each approached this truth from a different road. Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, teaches the strength of inner order. He reminds us that life will always bring insult, disorder, difficulty, and impermanence. Yet the mind can remain clear if it refuses to become a slave to what it cannot control. Musashi, the lone swordsman, teaches the strength of discipline and self-reliance. His life shows that mastery is built through repetition, simplicity, focus, and the willingness to walk alone when the path demands it. Nietzsche, perhaps more fiercely than anyone, teaches the strength of self-overcoming. He asks us to look at suffering, solitude, and struggle as forces that can deepen us, sharpen us, and pull us beyond the smaller version of ourselves. Together, these three figures form a philosophy of masculine self-mastery that is not dependent on status, appearance, or domination. It is based on character, on the ability to remain centered when life becomes uncertain, on the courage to detach from the opinions of others, on the discipline to choose long-term strength over short-term comfort, on the willingness to spend time alone without feeling incomplete. There is something rare about a person who can do this, because the modern world is designed to keep people reactive, distracted, and emotionally dependent. It wants you constantly stimulated, constantly comparing, constantly seeking some external signal that you are enough. The path of the unshakable man requires a different rhythm. It asks you to become slower in judgment, stronger in discipline, less desperate for approval, and more intimate with your own silence. It asks you to stop fleeing from difficulty and start using it as material. Every insult, every failure, every lonely season, every moment of discomfort becomes part of the training. Over time, you begin to realize that being unshakable does not mean life stops hurting. It means pain no longer decides who you become. It means solitude no longer frightens you. It means the world can pressure you without possessing you. This is the journey ahead, a return to inner command, a movement away from noise and toward strength, a study of how a man becomes steady in an unstable world, guided by the wisdom of Aurelius, Musashi, and Nietzsche. Most men move through life as if they are being carried by something they cannot see. They wake up already tired, already distracted, already pulled toward whatever feels easiest in the moment. Their attention drifts from one thing to another, never settling, never fully present, always searching for the next source of comfort or escape. They tell themselves they are in control, but their actions say otherwise. They hesitate when things become difficult, they delay when effort is required, and they retreat when discomfort appears. Over time, this pattern becomes invisible to them. It feels normal, it feels like life, but beneath that surface, something important is missing. Control, not over the world, not over other people, but over themselves. And without that, everything else begins to fall apart quietly, slowly, almost without notice. But there was once a man who refused to live like this. Miyamoto Musashi chose a path that most people would avoid the moment they truly understood what it demanded. He lived without attachment to comfort, without dependence on routine, without the need for approval or stability. He walked alone, not for a short period of reflection, but as a way of life. He moved from place to place as a ronin, a masterless samurai, shaping himself through discipline and constant challenge. He fought over 60 duels and remained undefeated, yet those victories were only the visible result of something far deeper. His true work was internal. While others trained their bodies, he trained his mind. While others sought advantage, he sought clarity. While others reacted to the world, he learned to remain unmoved by it. Musashi understood that self-mastery does not emerge naturally. It is not something you discover within yourself by accident, and it is not something that appears when life becomes easier. It is forged through resistance, through repetition, through the quiet and often uncomfortable act of doing what must be done regardless of how you feel. Most people are guided by preference. They move toward what they like and away from what they dislike, and over time, this simple pattern begins to define the limits of their life. They become dependent on certain conditions. They need the right mood, the right environment, the right level of comfort. And without realizing it, they build a life that can only function under very specific circumstances. Musashi saw the danger in this early on, and he refused to let preference dictate his actions. He expressed this idea clearly in his writings. You should not have any special fondness for a particular weapon or anything else for that matter. Too much is the same as not enough. This was not simply advice about combat. It was a reflection of how he approached life itself. To have a strong preference is to create a dependency, and dependency weakens your ability to adapt. The more you rely on something being a certain way, the less capable you are when it changes. Most people never question this. They build routines that feel comfortable, surround themselves with familiar environments, and repeat the same patterns until those patterns become necessary for them to function. But life does not remain stable. Conditions shift, situations change, and when they do, those who depend on comfort begin to struggle. Musashi trained himself to avoid this trap completely. He did not allow himself to become attached to a specific method, a specific place, or a specific way of living. He remained flexible because it was necessary for mastery. There is something deeply uncomfortable about this way of living. It removes the sense of safety that most people rely on. It forces you to face situations without the usual support of habit and preference. But within that discomfort, something begins to change. You start to rely less on external conditions and more on your own ability to respond. You begin to see that control does not come from shaping the world around you, but from shaping your reaction to it. This realization is simple, but it is not easy to live by. It requires constant awareness. It requires the willingness to act against your own impulses. And it requires a kind of honesty that most people avoid because it reveals how little control they actually have. Musashi carried this understanding with him throughout his life, and in his final days, he reduced everything he had learned into a set of simple principles. They were the result of a life lived in discipline, written with complete clarity just days before his death. The first of these principles was direct and uncompromising. Accept everything just the way it is. At first, this can sound passive, as if it suggests surrender or inaction, but that is not what Musashi meant. Acceptance, in this sense, is not about giving up. It is about seeing reality without distortion. Most people resist what happens to them. They hold on to expectations, they replay events in their minds, they imagine how things could have been different. This resistance creates tension, and that tension consumes energy. It clouds judgment. It leads to hesitation and emotional reaction. Musashi removed that layer completely. He saw things as they were without adding anything unnecessary. And because of that, he was able to act with precision. This kind of acceptance is not easy. It requires letting go of the need for things to be different. It requires stepping out of the habit of reacting emotionally to every inconvenience, every setback, every unexpected outcome. But once that habit is broken, something changes. You begin to move through situations with a kind of calm that is not dependent on circumstances. You stop wasting energy on resistance, and that energy becomes available for action. This is where discipline begins to take shape. Not as something forced, but as something natural, something aligned with how you see the world. Musashi did not chase comfort because he understood its cost. Every time you choose comfort over effort, you reinforce a pattern. You teach yourself to avoid difficulty, to delay action, to wait for a better moment. These patterns accumulate, and over time, they become your default way of living. Most people never break out of this cycle because it feels harmless in the moment. Skipping effort once does not seem significant. Avoiding discomfort once does not seem important. But these small decisions repeat, and repetition builds identity. Without realizing it, you become someone who avoids, someone who delays, someone who depends on feeling ready. Musashi broke that cycle completely. He removed his dependence on comfort by exposing himself to discomfort repeatedly, intentionally. He chose the harder path so often that it became familiar. He trained himself to act without hesitation, to move without needing the right feeling, to continue without questioning whether it was worth it. This is what made him different. Not talent, not luck, but consistency in the direction that most people avoid. And this is where the idea of self-mastery becomes real. It is not something distant or abstract. It is built through small decisions repeated over time. The decision to focus when your mind wants to wander. The decision to act when your body wants to rest. The decision to remain still when your instinct is to escape. These decisions seem insignificant in isolation, but together they reshape the way you function. They create a level of control that most people never experience, because most people never train for it. Musashi's life stands as proof of what happens when someone commits fully to this path. He did not rely on external structure to guide him. He created his own. He did not wait for discipline to appear. He built it through repetition, and he did not seek an easy life. He sought a life that would make him stronger. This is why he walked alone, why he removed himself from comfort, why he embraced difficulty as part of his daily existence. Because he understood something that most people overlook. If you cannot control yourself, nothing else you achieve will matter for long. And so the path he followed was not just about becoming a better fighter or a more skilled individual. It was about becoming someone who is not controlled by impulse, not dependent on comfort, not shaped by distraction. Someone who can act with clarity, remain calm under pressure, and continue forward regardless of how they feel. That is the foundation of self-mastery, and it is built in the same place it has always been built, in the quiet, often uncomfortable space where you face yourself without distraction and choose again and again to take control. There is a quiet assumption that shapes the way most people live, and it often goes unnoticed. It is the belief that the main obstacles in life exist somewhere outside of us. People point to circumstances, to other individuals, to bad timing, to lack of opportunity. They search for reasons in the world around them, constantly adjusting their environment in the hope that something will finally align. And for a while, this way of thinking feels reasonable. Life is unpredictable. External factors do matter, but there comes a point where this focus on the outside becomes a kind of blindness. Because while you are looking outward, something much more important is being ignored. The patterns within you, the habits that repeat, the impulses that guide your decisions before you even realize a decision has been made. This is where the real struggle exists, and it is far more difficult to face because it cannot be blamed on anything else. Miyamoto Musashi understood this with unusual clarity. He saw that the greatest opponent a person will ever face is not another individual, not a difficult situation, not even the uncertainty of life itself. It is the lack of control over one's own mind. And this is why he placed such importance on awareness, on observation, on the ability to step back and see oneself without distortion. In the Book of Five Rings, he writes, "It is difficult to understand the universe if you only study one planet." At first glance, it seems like a statement about perspective, about the importance of seeing beyond a limited view. But when you turn it inward, it becomes something far more personal. Most people spend their lives studying the external world. They analyze situations, they observe others, they try to understand how things work outside of themselves. But they rarely apply that same level of attention inward. They do not study their own reactions, their own patterns, their own tendencies. They move through life without fully understanding the one thing that influences every decision they make: themselves. This creates a strange imbalance. You can become very skilled at navigating the external world while remaining completely unaware of what drives your internal one. You can understand systems, strategies, even people, but still be controlled by impulses you don't question. You can plan carefully and still act emotionally. You can know what you should do and still fail to do it. And when that happens, it feels confusing. It feels frustrating, because the problem is not a lack of knowledge, it is a lack of control. Musashi approached this differently. He treated his own mind as something that needed to be observed, understood, and trained. He did not assume that his instincts were reliable. He did not trust every feeling that appeared. Instead, he watched them. He paid attention to how they influenced his actions, and over time, he learned to separate himself from them. This is not something that happens quickly. It requires patience. It requires honesty. And most of all, it requires the willingness to see things you might not want to see. One of the most powerful obstacles in this process is the pursuit of pleasure. It seems harmless at first, even necessary. After all, pleasure feels good. It provides relief. It gives a sense of reward. But when it becomes the thing that guides your decisions, it begins to shape your behavior in subtle ways. You start to move toward what feels good in the moment, even when it works against you in the long run. You delay effort. You avoid discomfort. You look for the easiest path, not the most meaningful one. And over time, this pattern becomes automatic. Musashi addressed this directly in Dokudo. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. This is not a rejection of pleasure itself. It is a warning about what happens when pleasure becomes the goal. When you begin to seek it for its own sake, it stops being something that accompanies your life and starts becoming something that controls it. It pulls your attention away from what matters. It weakens your ability to endure difficulty. It makes discipline feel unnecessary, even unnatural. And without discipline, self-mastery becomes impossible. Pleasure, when uncontrolled, becomes a form of distraction. It fills the space that could be used for growth. It replaces effort with comfort, clarity with indulgence. And the more you rely on it, the harder it becomes to act without it. You begin to need the right mood, the right level of energy, the right conditions. You start to wait for motivation instead of creating structure. And in that waiting, time passes, opportunities fade, potential remains unrealized. Musashi chose to break this pattern completely. He did not allow pleasure to guide him. He did not build his life around comfort. Instead, he trained himself to act regardless of how he felt. This is where the idea of discipline begins to take a different form. It is no longer about forcing yourself to do something difficult once or twice. It becomes a consistent way of living, a way of responding to life that does not depend on temporary feelings. Another obstacle that stands in the way of self-mastery is the tendency to act without awareness. Most people move through their days on a kind of autopilot. They follow routines they have not chosen consciously. They adopt beliefs they have never questioned. They react in ways that feel natural, but are actually learned patterns. And because these patterns are familiar, they go unnoticed. They feel like part of who you are. Musashi recognized this danger as well, and he addressed it with a level of simplicity that makes it easy to overlook its importance. Do not act following customary beliefs. This principle cuts deeper than it seems. Customary beliefs are not just cultural ideas or traditions. They are the automatic responses you have developed over time. The way you think you should act, the way you think things should be done, the expectations you carry without realizing it. When you act based on these without questioning them, you are not truly choosing your actions, you are repeating them. Self-mastery requires something different. It requires conscious action, the ability to pause even briefly and see what you're about to do before you do it. The ability to notice the impulse, the emotion, the habit, and decide whether to follow it or not. This moment of awareness is small, but it changes everything, because within that moment, there is a choice. Most people never develop this awareness. They react instantly. Something happens, and they respond without thinking. They feel something, and they act on it. Over time, this creates a sense that their behavior is inevitable, that they cannot change the way they respond. But this is not true. The problem is not that they are weak. The problem is that they have not trained themselves to see the moment where choice exists. This is where the idea of the inner enemy becomes clear. It is not a single thing. It is a collection of patterns, the tendency to seek comfort, the habit of avoiding effort, the impulse to react without thinking, the attachment to beliefs that have never been examined. These patterns work together, shaping your behavior in ways that feel natural, but are actually limiting. And this is why the struggle is so difficult. Because the enemy is not separate from you, it is part of you. It is built into the way you think and act. It feels familiar, it feels normal, and because of that, it is easy to ignore. But ignoring it comes at a cost. When you are controlled by these patterns, your actions are no longer fully your own. You become predictable. You repeat the same behaviors even when they lead to outcomes you do not want. You know what you should do, but you don't do it. You set goals, but you don't follow through. You tell yourself things will change, but they don't. And over time, this creates a sense of frustration, even self-doubt. It feels like something is missing, like you are capable of more but unable to access it. Musashi would see this clearly. He would not describe it as a lack of potential. He would not describe it as weakness in the way most people understand it. He would see it as a lack of discipline, a lack of control. You are not weak, you are undisciplined. And discipline, unlike talent or intelligence, is something that can be built. But it begins with awareness, with the ability to see your own patterns clearly, without avoiding them. To notice when you are choosing comfort over effort. To notice when you are reacting instead of choosing. To notice when you are following a habit instead of making a decision. This awareness is uncomfortable. It removes the illusion that your behavior is out of your control. It places responsibility back where it belongs, with you. And that is where the path of self-mastery begins to take shape. Not in becoming someone else, but in gaining control over who you already are. Because once you can see the enemy within, clearly and without distortion, you are no longer fighting blindly. And once you are no longer fighting blindly, you can begin to train with intention. There's a moment, often quiet and unnoticed, where a person begins to understand that change will not come from a single decision. It will not come from a sudden burst of motivation, or from finding the right strategy, or from waiting until everything feels aligned. That moment is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion that improvement is something you can achieve quickly. It forces you to see that progress is built slowly, through repetition, through consistency, through actions that often feel small and insignificant. Most people resist this realization. They look for something faster, something easier, something that will give them results without requiring sustained effort. But the deeper truth remains unchanged. The life you want is not built in moments of intensity. It is built in the patterns you repeat every day. Miyamoto Musashi understood this at a level that went far beyond theory. He did not treat discipline as something separate from life. He did not see it as a task to complete or a phase to go through. For him, discipline was the structure of his existence. It shaped how he thought, how he moved, how he trained, how he responded to every situation he encountered. It was not something he turned on when needed and ignored when it was inconvenient. It was constant. It was embedded in everything he did, and because of that, it transformed him in a way that cannot be replicated through occasional effort. In the Book of 5 Rings, he writes, "You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain." This line carries a kind of quiet warning. It speaks to the tendency people have to search for a single answer, a single method, a single path that will lead them to mastery. People want certainty. They want to know that if they follow a specific set of steps, they will reach their goal. But Musashi points towards something different. There is no single path. There is no perfect method. There is no shortcut that bypasses the need for effort. What exists instead is practice, repetition, the willingness to continue even when progress feels slow. This understanding changes the way you approach discipline. It removes the expectation that there is a perfect way to do things. It removes the need to wait until you feel ready. And in its place, it leaves something much more demanding. The responsibility to act consistently, regardless of the conditions. When you accept that there are many paths, you also accept that the path you are on only works if you stay on it. You stop searching for something better, and you start committing to what is in front of you. Most people never reach this point. They move from one method to another, constantly adjusting, constantly searching, constantly hoping that the next approach will finally make things easier. But this constant movement prevents them from building anything solid. Discipline requires stability. It requires staying with something long enough for it to shape you. And that kind of consistency is difficult because it removes the excitement of novelty. It replaces it with repetition. Musashi did not avoid repetition. He embraced it. He understood that mastery is built through doing the same thing again and again with full attention, refining it each time. This is not glamorous. It does not produce immediate results. But over time, it creates something powerful. It creates a level of control that cannot be achieved any other way. He expresses this idea with remarkable clarity. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. This line captures the essence of self-mastery. The focus is not on others. It is not on comparison. It is not on proving anything externally. The focus is on the internal process of improvement. Each day becomes an opportunity to move slightly beyond who you were before, through small, deliberate actions that build on each other. When you approach discipline in this way, something shifts. You stop measuring progress based on outcomes that are outside of your control. You stop looking for validation in external results. Instead, you begin to measure your success by your ability to act according to your own standards. Did you do what you said you would do? Did you follow through even when it was difficult? Did you maintain control over your actions regardless of how you felt? These questions become more important than any external achievement. And over time, this changes your relationship with effort. It no longer feels like something you have to force. It becomes something you expect from yourself. It becomes part of your identity. You are no longer trying to become disciplined. You are someone who acts with discipline. This is where repetition becomes powerful. Every action you take reinforces a pattern. When you choose to act with discipline, even in a small way, you strengthen that pattern. When you avoid effort, you strengthen a different one. These patterns accumulate, and over time they define how you respond to life. Most people underestimate this process because it feels gradual. They look for noticeable change, and when they do not see it immediately, they lose motivation. But the real change is happening beneath the surface, in the structure of your behavior. Musashi built his life around this understanding. He did not rely on motivation to guide him. He relied on structure, on routine, on the repetition of actions that aligned with his goals. This allowed him to continue even when he did not feel like it, even when conditions were not ideal, because his actions were not dependent on how he felt. They were part of how he lived. Another principle he emphasized reflects this mindset clearly. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. This statement challenges something that quietly interferes with discipline: ego. The tendency to center everything around yourself, your feelings, your preferences, your sense of importance. When you think too highly of yourself, you become sensitive to discomfort. You expect things to be easier. You resist effort because it challenges the image you have of yourself. And when that image is threatened, you pull back. Thinking lightly of yourself does not mean diminishing your worth. It means removing the unnecessary focus on your own comfort and preference. It allows you to act without constantly evaluating how you feel. It creates space for awareness. And with that awareness, you begin to see things more clearly. You see what needs to be done, without filtering it through emotion or ego. At the same time, thinking deeply of the world expands your perspective. It shifts your attention outward, toward understanding, toward observation, toward learning. This combination creates balance. You are not trapped in your own head, constantly reacting to internal states. You are engaged with the process, focused on the work, aware of the bigger picture. This mindset supports discipline in a subtle but powerful way. It removes the internal resistance that often makes discipline feel difficult. When you are not constantly focused on how something feels, it becomes easier to act. When you are not protecting your ego, it becomes easier to face challenges. When you are not seeking validation, it becomes easier to continue without immediate results. From a practical perspective, this way of living requires structure, not a rigid system that controls every aspect of your life, but a clear set of standards that guide your actions. A daily discipline system. This does not need to be complicated. In fact, simplicity is often more effective. A few key actions, repeated consistently, can create significant change over time. The challenge is not in designing the system, it is in following it. This is where most people struggle. They create plans, set goals, design routines, but they do not follow through consistently. They negotiate with themselves. They adjust the plan when it becomes uncomfortable. They skip actions when they do not feel like doing them, and each time they do this, they weaken the structure they are trying to build. Musashi did not negotiate with himself. When something needed to be done, he did it. This level of commitment is difficult because it requires you to act against your own resistance. It requires you to follow through even when there is no immediate reward, even when the effort feels repetitive, even when progress is not visible. But this is exactly what builds discipline. Repetition leads to identity. The actions you take consistently shape who you become. When you act with discipline repeatedly, you begin to see yourself as someone who is disciplined. And that perception reinforces the behavior. It creates a cycle. Your actions shape your identity, and your identity shapes your actions. This cycle can work in both directions. If you consistently avoid effort, you begin to see yourself as someone who lacks discipline, and that perception makes it easier to continue avoiding effort. Breaking this cycle requires conscious action. It requires you to act differently, even when it feels unnatural, even when it goes against your current patterns. Over time, these actions accumulate. They create a foundation, a way of living that is not dependent on mood or circumstance. And from that foundation, something begins to emerge. Stability, control, the ability to act consistently, regardless of what is happening around you. This is what Musashi built. Not just skill, not just strength, but a way of living that supported both. A structure that allowed him to continue improving, regardless of the conditions. And this is what makes discipline powerful. It is not a single action, it is a system. A way of responding to life that, when applied consistently, leads to mastery. And once that system is in place, something changes. You no longer rely on motivation. You no longer wait for the right moment. You act because it is what you do. And that is when discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like who you are. There is a kind of silence that most people rarely experience, and when they do, they feel an immediate urge to escape it. It is not the silence of a quiet room or an empty street, but something deeper, something internal. It appears when there is nothing left to distract you, nothing left to occupy your attention, nothing left to pull you outward. In that space, there is no noise to hide behind, no conversation to fill the gaps, no stimulation to keep your mind occupied. There is only you, and whatever remains when everything else is removed. For many people, this is uncomfortable in a way that is difficult to explain. They reach for their phone, they turn on music, they look for something, anything, to break that silence. But that silence is not empty. It is revealing. It shows you what your mind does when it is left alone. It shows you what you avoid, what you repeat, what you rely on without realizing it. And this is why solitude plays such a central role in self-mastery, because without it, you never truly see yourself clearly. Miyamoto Musashi did not treat solitude as something temporary or optional. He lived within it, because he understood what solitude makes possible. When you are alone, you are no longer reacting to the presence of others. You are no longer adjusting your behavior to fit expectations, or seeking validation, or being influenced by constant input. The patterns that usually remain hidden begin to surface. You notice how your thoughts move, how your emotions rise and fall, how your attention shifts without control. And for the first time, you begin to see the difference between what you are aware of and what is simply happening automatically. This distinction is subtle, but it is essential. Without it, there is no control, only reaction. Musashi expresses this awareness in one of the principles he wrote near the end of his life in Dokodo. Do not depend on a partial feeling. This idea speaks directly to the instability of emotion. Feelings change quickly. They rise and fall based on circumstances, on thoughts, on things that often have little to do with what actually matters. Most people allow these shifting states to guide their actions. When they feel motivated, they act. When they feel tired, they stop. When they feel uncertain, they hesitate. And because these feelings are constantly changing, their actions become inconsistent. They move forward for a short time, then pull back, then start again, then stop again. This creates a cycle where progress is always interrupted, always incomplete. Solitude exposes this pattern in a way that cannot be ignored. When you are alone, you begin to notice how unreliable your emotions are. You see how quickly your mind searches for something easier, something more comfortable, something that requires less effort. You see how often you avoid what you know you should do simply because you do not feel like doing it. And once you see this clearly, something begins to shift. You realize that if you continue to depend on these feelings, you will remain stuck in the same patterns. You begin to understand that control requires acting independently of how you feel. This is where solitude becomes powerful. It creates a space where you can observe without interference, where you can sit with your thoughts without immediately reacting to them, where you can notice an impulse without following it. This distance allows you to develop a different kind of relationship with your mind. Instead of being carried by every thought and feeling, you begin to watch them. You begin to see them as temporary, as something that passes, rather than something that must be acted upon. But solitude does not only reveal your internal patterns, it also highlights your attachments, the things you rely on without questioning, the distractions you turn to automatically, the noise you surround yourself with to avoid being alone with your thoughts. These attachments often feel harmless, even necessary, but they shape your behavior in ways that limit your control. Musashi addresses this in another principle. Do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. At first, this seems like advice about material things, about simplifying your life, about letting go of unnecessary objects. But its meaning extends much further. Possessions are not only physical, they include anything you cling to unnecessarily. Habits, routines, distractions, even ideas about yourself. When you hold on to these without question, they begin to define how you live. They create dependencies, and those dependencies reduce your ability to act freely. In the modern world, these attachments often take the form of constant stimulation. Phones, social media, endless streams of content that fill every available moment. There is always something to watch, something to scroll through, something to listen to, and because of this, silence becomes rare. Stillness becomes unfamiliar. People move from one source of stimulation to another, never allowing their minds to settle. This creates a kind of mental noise that is always present, always influencing how they think and feel. Solitude removes that noise, and when it does, the contrast is immediate. Without constant input, your mind begins to slow down. Thoughts become clearer, patterns become visible. But this clarity can feel uncomfortable at first, because it reveals things you might prefer not to see. It shows you where you lack discipline, where you avoid effort, where you rely on distraction instead of focus. Most people avoid solitude because they cannot face themselves. They are not afraid of being alone, they are afraid of what they might discover when they are. Musashi did not avoid this confrontation, he sought it out. He used solitude as a tool for refinement, a way to sharpen his awareness and strengthen his control. In that quiet space, without distraction, he trained his mind to remain steady, to remain focused, to remain clear, regardless of what thoughts or emotions appeared. He expresses this deeper level of awareness in the Book of 5 Rings. Perceive that which cannot be seen with the eye. This line points towards something beyond physical observation. It speaks to insight, to the ability to understand things that are not immediately visible. This kind of perception cannot be developed in constant noise. It requires stillness. It requires attention. It requires the patience to sit with something long enough for deeper understanding to emerge. In solitude, this becomes possible. Without distractions pulling your attention outward, you begin to notice subtleties that would otherwise be missed. You begin to understand your own patterns more deeply. You begin to see connections between your thoughts and your actions, and with that understanding comes the ability to change. Clarity is not something that can be forced. It does not appear when you demand it. It emerges when there is space for it, and solitude creates that space. It removes the constant interference that prevents deeper thought. It allows your mind to settle, to organize, to process. And in that process, something begins to take shape, a clearer sense of direction, a stronger sense of control. This does not happen instantly. It develops over time through repeated exposure to stillness. At first, the mind resists. It looks for distraction. It creates reasons to avoid the silence. But if you remain, if you do not give in to that impulse, the resistance begins to fade. The mind becomes quieter. The need for constant stimulation decreases. And in its place, a different kind of focus emerges. This focus is not forced. It is natural. It does not rely on external conditions. It comes from within. And once it is developed, it changes how you move through the world. You become less reactive, less dependent on stimulation, more aware of your actions, more deliberate in your choices. This is why solitude is essential for self-mastery. It provides the environment where awareness can develop, where attachments can be seen and released, where the mind can be trained without interference. Without it, you remain influenced by constant noise, constantly reacting, constantly adjusting to external input. Musashi's life reflects this understanding. He did not isolate himself to escape the world. He did it to understand it more clearly, to understand himself more deeply, and to build a level of control that could not be shaken by external conditions. And this control did not come from avoiding difficulty. It came from facing it directly, in the one place where it cannot be avoided: within. There comes a point in this process where something begins to change. Situations that once created hesitation no longer have the same effect. Moments that would have triggered emotional reactions begin to pass without disturbance. The internal noise that used to dominate your attention becomes quieter, more distant, less persuasive. It is because your relationship with those challenges has changed. You are no longer being pulled in different directions by impulse, by emotion, by distraction. There is a kind of steadiness that begins to take shape, a kind of control that does not rely on conditions being perfect. And from that steadiness, action becomes clearer, more precise, more intentional. Miyamoto Musashi described this state with a level of simplicity that hides its depth. In Dokodo, he writes, "In all things, have no preferences." At first, this idea can seem extreme, even unrealistic. Preferences feel natural. They guide daily choices, shape routines, and influence behavior in ways that seem harmless. But when you look more closely, you begin to see how deeply they affect your ability to act. Preference creates attachment. It creates a tendency to move toward what feels comfortable and away from what feels difficult. And when this pattern becomes automatic, it limits your range of action. You begin to rely on certain conditions. You need things to be a certain way, in order to perform. And when those conditions are not met, your ability to act is reduced. To have no preferences does not mean becoming indifferent or detached from life. It means removing the emotional dependence on specific outcomes or conditions. It means being able to act regardless of whether something feels pleasant or unpleasant, easy or difficult. This creates a kind of freedom that is difficult to describe until it is experienced. You are no longer constrained by your own inclinations. You are not pulled toward comfort or pushed away from discomfort. You are able to respond based on what is required, not on what you feel. This is where hesitation begins to disappear. You may still feel uncertainty, resistance, even discomfort, but these feelings no longer interrupt your ability to move forward. They become part of the experience, not obstacles to it. And in that space, action becomes more direct, more controlled, more aligned with intention rather than reaction. This level of control does not appear suddenly. It is built through repeated exposure to situations that challenge your usual patterns. It is built by acting in moments where you would normally hesitate, by continuing in moments where you would normally stop, by remaining calm in moments where you would normally react. Each time you do this, you reinforce a different way of responding. You create a new pattern, and over time, that pattern becomes your default. Musashi understood that this process depends entirely on how you train, not just in formal practice, but in the way you live your daily life. In the Book of 5 Rings, he emphasizes a principle that applies far beyond combat. You can only fight the way you practice. This idea is direct and unavoidable. The way you perform under pressure is not something you can decide in the moment. It is something that has already been determined by your habits. When a situation becomes intense, when there is little time to think, when the stakes are high, you do not rise to a new level. You fall back to what you have practiced. You act according to your patterns. This is why daily behavior matters so much. Not because each individual action is significant on its own, but because those actions accumulate. They form the foundation of how you respond when it matters. If you allow yourself to avoid effort in small moments, that pattern will appear in larger ones. If you react emotionally in minor situations, that reaction will carry into more important ones. If you hesitate when the cost is low, that hesitation will remain when the cost is high. Most people separate preparation from action. They believe they will behave differently when the situation demands it, that they will be more focused, more disciplined, more controlled when it truly matters. But this belief is not supported by experience. In reality, behavior under pressure is simply an extension of behavior in ordinary moments. The difference is not in the situation, it is in the level of intensity. Musashi did not rely on the hope that he would perform well when it counted. He trained his mind and body so that performance was consistent regardless of the situation. This consistency came from repetition, from aligning his daily actions with the level of control he wanted to maintain, from treating every moment as part of the same process rather than dividing life into separate categories of practice and performance. This approach creates a different kind of mindset, one that does not depend on external conditions, one that remains steady even when those conditions change. This is what can be described as an unshakable mind, not a mind that never experiences difficulty, but a mind that is not disrupted by it, a mind that can remain clear when things become chaotic, that can act without hesitation when there is pressure, that can maintain control when others lose it. This state is often misunderstood. It is sometimes seen as emotional detachment or suppression, but it is neither of those things. It is awareness combined with control. You are aware of what you feel, but you are not controlled by it. You experience thoughts and emotions, but they do not dictate your actions. This allows for a level of precision that is not possible when reactions are automatic. In practical terms, this means responding rather than reacting. It means creating a small space between what happens and what you do. In that space, there is choice, and that choice is what defines your actions. Most people do not experience this space because their reactions are immediate. Something happens, and they respond without awareness. But through discipline, through repetition, through the kind of training Musashi embodied, that space begins to expand, and within that space, control becomes possible. This is where self-mastery moves from theory into action. It is no longer about understanding principles or recognizing patterns. It is about applying them consistently in real situations, under real pressure. It is about maintaining clarity when things are uncertain, maintaining discipline when things are difficult, maintaining control when things are unpredictable. And this is the point where everything connects. The awareness developed in solitude, the discipline built through repetition, the detachment from preference, all of it comes together in how you act, not in isolated moments, but in the continuous flow of daily life. Each action becomes an expression of that internal structure. Each decision reflects the level of control you have developed. When you reach this point, something changes in how you see challenges. They no longer feel like obstacles to avoid. They become opportunities to apply what you have built, to test your control, to refine your response. This does not make them easy, but it makes them meaningful. It gives them a purpose beyond the immediate difficulty. And this brings the focus back to you. You do not need a sword. You do not need a battlefield. The conditions that shaped Musashi's life are different from yours, but the principles remain the same. The struggle is still internal. The challenge is still control. The patterns that limit you are still present, and the process of overcoming them is still available. Your enemy is not outside of you. It is in the habits you repeat, in the distractions you rely on, in the lack of control over your own actions. And just like Musashi, you have the ability to confront that enemy not once but continuously through the way you live. This path is not easy. It requires consistency, awareness, and a willingness to act without relying on comfort, but it leads somewhere that nothing else does. To a state where your actions are aligned with your intentions, where your mind remains steady under pressure, where you are not controlled by the things that once limited you. The way of the samurai is not about fighting others. It is about becoming someone who no longer needs to. There is a kind of pressure that never announces itself, never speaks directly, and yet quietly shapes the way you move through your life. It doesn't come from a single person, and it doesn't require an audience to exist. It follows you into ordinary moments, sits with you while you make decisions, and lingers in the background of your thoughts as you go about your day. You feel it when you hesitate before speaking, when you rewrite a message 3 times before sending it, when you imagine how something might be received before you even fully understand what you want to say. It is the sense of being observed, evaluated, measured against standards that were never clearly defined, yet somehow always present. And over time, without realizing it, you begin to adjust yourself to meet those invisible expectations, shaping your words, your actions, even your personality, to avoid a reaction that may never have existed in the first place. This is where the mental loop begins. A simple decision is no longer simple. It becomes layered with possibilities, each one branching into imagined outcomes. You think about how it might look, how it might sound, how it might be interpreted. You consider the risks of being misunderstood, the discomfort of standing out, the subtle danger of being judged. And so, instead of acting, you pause. Instead of expressing, you filter. Instead of moving forward, you analyze. What could have been a direct, honest moment becomes delayed, softened, reshaped into something safer, something more acceptable. And the more often this happens, the more natural it begins to feel, until you no longer recognize it as hesitation. It simply becomes the way you operate. At some point, life begins to feel less like something you are actively living and more like something you are carefully managing. You are no longer fully engaged with what you are doing, but with how it appears while you are doing it. Conversations become performances, decisions become calculations. Even your interests and desires start to shift, subtly influenced by what seems acceptable, respectable, or impressive. Without noticing the exact moment it happened, you begin to live in relation to others rather than from within yourself. And this shift is so gradual, so quiet that it rarely feels like a loss. It feels like maturity, like awareness, like responsibility. But beneath that surface, something important has been replaced. The realization doesn't arrive as a dramatic awakening. It comes slowly, often in moments of exhaustion. You start to feel the weight of constantly thinking about how you are being perceived. You notice how much energy is spent anticipating reactions that never fully arrive. You see how often you hold back. And in that awareness, a question begins to form, one that is difficult to ignore once it appears. How much of your life is actually yours, and how much of it has been shaped by the imagined presence of others? It is here that something begins to shift, not externally, not in your circumstances, but internally, in the way you interpret what is happening. You begin to see that the pressure you have been responding to is not as solid as it once seemed. It is built from assumptions, from past experiences, from fragments of memory and expectations stitched together into something that feels real enough to influence your behavior. And yet, when examined closely, it becomes clear that much of what you have been reacting to has never been directly placed in front of you. It exists in your interpretation of how others might think, rather than in what they have actually expressed. There is a line from Marcus Aurelius that captures this contradiction with unsettling precision. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. It is a strange inversion, almost paradoxical when first considered. You spend your entire life inside your own mind, experiencing your own thoughts, feeling your own emotions, navigating your own struggles. No one else has access to that depth of experience, and yet, despite this, the opinions that carry the most weight are often the ones that come from outside of you, from people who only see fragments, who interpret without context, who form judgments based on incomplete information. This creates a kind of internal division. On one side, there is your own perception, your instincts, your understanding of what feels right or meaningful. On the other, there is the imagined perception of others, constantly shifting, impossible to fully grasp, yet treated as something that must be satisfied. And instead of choosing one, you attempt to balance both, adjusting yourself to maintain alignment with expectations that are never fully clear. The result is not harmony, but tension, a quiet, persistent tension that follows you into decisions, into relationships, into the way you see yourself. Over time, this tension begins to shape your identity. You become more cautious, more measured, more aware of how you might be perceived than how you actually feel. You start to second-guess your own judgments, and in doing so, you slowly distance yourself from your own perspective. You begin to trust external signals more than internal ones, treating approval as a form of validation and disapproval as a sign that something must be corrected. But because those signals are inconsistent, often contradictory, you are left in a constant state of adjustment, never fully settled, always slightly off balance. The cost of this is not always obvious. It doesn't necessarily appear as a major failure or a dramatic loss. It shows itself in smaller ways, in the quiet erosion of clarity, in the hesitation before action, in the sense that something feels off, but is difficult to define. You may find yourself delaying decisions, avoiding certain paths, or choosing options that feel safe rather than meaningful. And when you look back, it becomes difficult to identify exactly why you made those choices, because they were not driven by a clear intention, but by a subtle desire to avoid discomfort, to remain within the boundaries of what feels acceptable. At a certain point, the question becomes unavoidable. If so much of your behavior is shaped by how it might be received, then what would remain if that influence were removed? What would you say if you were not concerned with how it sounded? What would you pursue if the outcome did not affect how you were seen? These questions do not have immediate answers, and they are not meant to. Their purpose is to reveal the extent to which your current direction has been influenced by something outside of your control. And this is where the initial idea of stopping caring begins to take form. It appears as a kind of solution, a way to escape the constant pressure, to remove the weight of expectation and return to something more direct. But at first, it feels extreme, almost reckless. The idea of not caring about how things are perceived, about how actions are interpreted, about how you are judged, seems like it would lead to isolation, to disconnection, to a loss of structure. It seems as though caring is what keeps everything in place, but the deeper realization is not about removing care altogether. It is about understanding where that care is being placed, because the problem was never that you cared. The problem is that your attention, your energy, your concern have been directed toward things that were never yours to hold in the first place. You have been investing in outcomes you cannot control, in opinions you cannot shape, in perceptions that shift without your input, and in doing so, you have neglected the one area where your influence is absolute. It begins as a subtle recognition, a slight reorientation in the way you approach decisions. Instead of asking how something will be received, you begin to ask whether it aligns with your own understanding. Instead of focusing on the reaction, you focus on the action. And while this may seem like a small change, it alters the entire structure of how you engage with your life. There is a structure beneath your thoughts that quietly determines where your attention goes, what you react to, and what ultimately shapes your experience of life. It operates so naturally that it rarely feels like a structure at all, more like an instinct, something automatic, something obvious. You care about how things turn out, you care about how you are perceived, you care about whether your efforts lead to the result you had in mind. It feels reasonable. It feels like the correct way to engage with the world. But hidden within that instinct is a subtle misalignment, one that shifts your focus away from what is actually within your reach and anchors it instead to things that move independently of you. Epictetus described this misalignment with a clarity that feels almost too simple at first. Some things are in our control and others not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion. Not in our control are body, property, reputation, command. The distinction is clean, almost uncomfortably direct. There is a boundary and everything in your life falls on one side or the other. Your thoughts, your choices, your actions belong to you. Outcomes, reactions, external conditions do not. Yet the way most people live suggests that this line has been blurred to the point of invisibility. Instead of organizing their lives around what they can influence, people tend to orient themselves around what feels important, and what feels important is often what is most visible, most immediate, most socially reinforced. Reputation becomes a measure of worth, outcomes become a measure of success. Validation becomes a signal that you are on the right path, and so attention shifts outward. Energy is invested in how things are received rather than how they are done. The result is a life built around variables that are constantly changing, variables that do not respond to effort in a predictable way. variables that remain partially or entirely outside of your control, no matter how much you try to influence them. This reversal creates a quiet instability. When your sense of progress depends on outcomes, every delay feels like failure. When your sense of self depends on reputation, every opinion feels like a judgment. When your direction depends on validation, every absence of approval feels like a sign to stop. And because these external factors are never fully stable, your internal state begins to mirror that instability. You feel confident when things go well, uncertain when they do not, motivated when there is recognition, hesitant when there is not. Without realizing it, you have tied your inner world to something that does not belong to you. The deeper problem is not just that you care about these things, but that you expect them to behave in a way that aligns with your effort. You assume that if you do something well, it will be recognized. If you make the right decision, it will lead to the right outcome. If you present yourself clearly, you will be understood. And when these expectations are not met, it creates a kind of friction that is difficult to resolve. You search for explanations, you question your approach, you adjust your behavior, all in an attempt to regain a sense of control over something that was never fully controllable to begin with. This is where the sense of being trapped begins to take shape. Not in a dramatic or obvious way, but as a pattern that repeats itself across different areas of your life. You work toward a goal, but your satisfaction depends on the result. You express an idea, but your confidence depends on how it is received. You make a decision, but your certainty depends on whether it leads to the expected outcome. Each of these situations places something essential just outside your reach. Your effort is yours, but the meaning of that effort is determined by something else. And so, no matter how much you do, there is always a part of the equation that remains unresolved. This pattern extends even further when it comes to other people. Much of the energy you spend navigating your life is directed toward anticipating how others will think, how they will react, how they will interpret what you do. You try to present yourself in a certain way, to avoid certain impressions, to create others. But in doing so, you are attempting to influence something that exists entirely within another person's mind, shaped by their experiences, their biases, their current state, none of which you can access directly. You are, in effect, trying to control a process that is not only outside of you, but also constantly shifting in ways you cannot predict. The more you engage in this process, the more it reinforces itself. You adjust your behavior to avoid negative reactions, which leads you to monitor those reactions more closely, which increases your sensitivity to them, which leads to further adjustment. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where your actions are no longer guided primarily by your own understanding, but by your interpretation of how they might be perceived. And because that interpretation is never fully certain, it generates a continuous need for correction, for refinement, for caution. There's a second line from Epictetus that cuts through this loop with a kind of stark honesty. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. It is not a suggestion that comes easily. It goes against a deeply ingrained instinct to maintain a certain image, to avoid appearing incompetent, to protect your standing in the eyes of others. And yet, within that discomfort lies a necessary condition for freedom. Because as long as your actions are filtered through the need to appear a certain way, they are no longer entirely your own. To be willing to be seen as foolish is to release the need for constant approval. It is to accept that misunderstanding, disagreement, and even criticism are not indicators that you are on the wrong path, but natural consequences of acting according to your own judgment. This does not mean disregarding feedback or ignoring reality, but it does mean removing the assumption that external perception must always align with your intention. It allows for a separation between what you do and how it is received, a separation that creates space for clarity. Most people never fully reach this point. There is a comfort in aligning with expectations, in moving within established boundaries, in avoiding situations where you might be judged negatively. That comfort comes at a cost, but it is a familiar cost, one that feels manageable because it is consistent. Stepping outside of it introduces uncertainty. It exposes you to reactions that you cannot control, outcomes that are not guaranteed, perceptions that may not be favorable. And so, the instinct is to remain within the known structure, even if it limits your ability to act freely. But as long as that structure remains in place, the underlying dynamic does not change. Your attention continues to be directed toward things that are not yours to control. Your sense of stability continues to depend on factors that are inherently unstable, and your actions continue to be shaped by considerations that exist outside of your own understanding. The result is a form of constraint that is not imposed from the outside, but maintained from within, through patterns of thought that feel natural but lead to a narrowing of possibility. The realization that emerges from this is not immediate, and it does not arrive as a sudden conclusion. It builds gradually as you begin to notice the pattern across different situations, as you see the same dynamic play out in different forms. You recognize that the tension you feel, the hesitation, the constant evaluation, are not isolated experiences, but expressions of a deeper misalignment. And with that recognition comes a shift in perspective. The question is no longer how to manage outcomes more effectively or how to influence perception more precisely, but how to redirect your attention toward what is actually within your reach. This is where the idea of control becomes more than a concept. It becomes a practical distinction, one that can be applied moment by moment. In any situation, there is what you can do and what you cannot determine. Your effort belongs to you. The result does not. Your intention is yours. The interpretation is not. Your action is within your control. The reaction is not. Seeing this clearly does not remove uncertainty from life, but it changes your relationship to it. It allows you to engage fully where you have influence and to release what lies beyond it without the need to resolve it. And in that shift, the structure that once felt natural begins to reveal itself as a kind of constraint, not imposed by external forces, but sustained by the way attention has been directed. A constraint that can be loosened, not by controlling more, but by recognizing where control ends. Because once you see that much of what you have been holding on to was never yours to hold, it becomes possible to let go without losing anything essential. There is a point where understanding is no longer enough, where seeing the pattern clearly does not automatically dissolve it, and where the difference between knowing and living becomes impossible to ignore. Up to now, everything has been internal. A shift in perspective, a reorientation of attention, a recognition of what has been quietly shaping your decisions. But without action, even the clearest insight fades back into habit. The mind returns to its familiar loops, the same hesitations reappear, and the same patterns continue to operate beneath the surface. What changes this is not a single decision, but a series of small, deliberate movements that gradually reshape how you respond in real time. Step 1. Awareness. It begins with noticing, not in a vague or general sense, but in specific moments, as they happen. There is a point just before hesitation takes over, a brief pause where a decision is still forming, where the impulse to act is met by a second thought. In that space, you can see the pattern begin to unfold. You notice how quickly your attention shifts away from the action itself and toward how it might be received. You feel the subtle change in your body, the tightening, the slight withdrawal, the instinct to reconsider. These moments are easy to overlook because they pass quickly, often replaced by a more polished version of the decision, one that feels safer, more controlled. But if you begin to pay attention to them, they reveal something consistent. They show you exactly when your behavior is being shaped by something outside of your control. Marcus Aurelius captured the importance of this inner observation with a line that places responsibility directly where it belongs. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. What this suggests is not that you can eliminate every negative thought, but that the way you relate to those thoughts determines how they influence you. Awareness is what creates that space. Without it, thoughts pass through unnoticed, shaping your actions without resistance. With it, you begin to see them as they arise, to recognize their source, to decide whether they deserve your attention. This is where control begins, not in forcing a different outcome, but in seeing clearly what is happening within you as it happens. Step 2. Separate control in real time. Once you can see the pattern, the next step is to apply a simple question. Not occasionally, but consistently, in the moments where decisions are being made. The question is direct, almost deceptively so. Is this within my control? It does not require a complex answer, and it does not depend on interpretation. In any situation, there is what you can influence and what you cannot determine. Your action belongs to you. The result does not. When this distinction is applied in real time, it changes how you allocate your energy. Instead of trying to resolve the entire situation, you focus on the part that is actually yours to handle. If the answer is no, if what you are focusing on lies outside your control, the next movement is not to solve it, but to release it. Not through force, not by suppressing the thought, but by recognizing that it does not require your involvement. You allow it to remain unresolved, not because it is unimportant, but because it is not yours to determine. If the answer is yes, then the responsibility is clear. You act. You do what is required without waiting for additional certainty, without trying to account for every possible outcome. This creates a rhythm, a way of moving through situations that is grounded in clarity rather than reaction. Step 3. Practice letting go through action. Understanding what to release is one part of the process. Acting without holding on to what you have released is another. This is where practice becomes necessary, not in controlled environments, but in the situations that previously caused hesitation. You begin to speak without rehearsing every word, to share something without adjusting it to fit expectations, to move forward without confirming how it will be received. These actions may feel unfamiliar at first, not because they are inherently difficult, but because they remove a layer of control that had become habitual. There is a sense of exposure in them, a feeling that something has been left unguarded. This is where the perspective of Epictetus becomes practical rather than theoretical. The willingness to appear foolish, to be misunderstood, to act without securing approval beforehand is not an abstract ideal. It is a condition for moving freely. Each time you act without adjusting for perception, you weaken the hold that perception has over you. You begin to see that the anticipated consequences are often less severe than imagined, and even when they occur, they do not carry the weight you expected. The mind learns through repetition that action does not require complete control over how it is received. Step 4. Voluntary discomfort. There is a difference between encountering discomfort and choosing it. In one case, it appears as something to be avoided. In the other, it becomes a tool. When you deliberately place yourself in situations where you might be judged, where outcomes are uncertain, where failure is possible, you change your relationship to those experiences. They are no longer interruptions to be managed, but conditions to be engaged with. You speak when it would be easier to remain silent. You take a step forward when it would be safer to wait. You allow yourself to be seen without refining every detail. These choices are not about seeking difficulty for its own sake, but about expanding the range of what feels manageable. The more often you enter these situations, the less they define your response. Discomfort becomes familiar because it is no longer associated with immediate withdrawal. You begin to tolerate uncertainty without needing to resolve it, to accept that not every action will lead to a favorable outcome, and that this does not diminish the value of the action itself. This builds a form of resilience that is not dependent on avoiding challenges, but on engaging with them directly. Step 5. Build an internal standard. As external signals lose their influence, something else must take their place. Without a reference point, action becomes inconsistent, shifting with circumstances rather than guided by something stable. This is where an internal standard becomes necessary, not as a set of rigid rules, but as a clear understanding of how you choose to operate. It is defined not by outcomes, but by qualities that remain within your control. Effort, discipline, integrity, these are not dependent on how things unfold. They are present in the way you act, regardless of the result. Marcus Aurelius expressed this transition with a directness that leaves little room for hesitation. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. The shift here is from analysis to embodiment. Instead of refining your understanding endlessly, you begin to act according to it. You stop adjusting your behavior to match external expectations and start aligning it with your own standard. This creates a form of consistency that is not influenced by changing conditions. Your actions become expressions of that standard, not responses to what is happening around you. Step 6. Nightly reflection. At the end of the day, there is an opportunity to review not what happened, but how you responded to it. This is not a process of judgment, but of observation. You look back at the moments where hesitation appeared, where attention shifted outward, where actions were influenced by something outside your control. You ask yourself where your focus was placed, whether it aligned with what you had decided matters. You notice where the pattern returned and where it did not. The questions are simple, but they carry weight when asked consistently. What did I care about today that did not belong to me? Did I act based on fear or based on principle? These are not questions meant to produce immediate answers, but to refine awareness over time. Each reflection adds clarity, making it easier to recognize the pattern as it forms, making it easier to apply the distinction between what is yours and what is not. This process does not aim for perfection, but for gradual alignment, a steady movement toward acting in accordance with your own understanding. And as this alignment develops, something begins to change, not in the structure of the world, but in your relationship to it. The same uncertainties remain, the same reactions from others, the same unpredictability and outcomes, but they no longer hold the same position in your decisions. You are not waiting for them to settle before acting, not adjusting your direction based on how they shift. You move with a clarity that does not depend on their stability. Your life does not transform in a single moment. The conditions around you remain largely the same. The same situations arise, the same choices present themselves, the same uncertainties persist. But the way you engage with them is no longer the same. You are not drawn into every reaction, not influenced by every perception, not held back by every imagined outcome. There is a separation now, a space between what happens and how you respond to it. Within that space, something becomes possible that was not available before. You begin to act directly, without filtering every movement through external considerations. You think clearly, not because the world has become simpler, but because your attention is no longer divided. You move without the constant need to secure approval or avoid disapproval. The energy that was once used to manage perception becomes available for something else. For action, for focus, for engagement with what is actually within your reach. And slowly, without any dramatic shift, you begin to notice that you are no longer reacting in the same way. The patterns that once felt automatic begin to loosen. The hesitation that once defined your decisions becomes less frequent. The need to adjust, to anticipate, to control what cannot be controlled begins to fade. What remains is a way of moving through your life that is grounded in something stable, something that does not change with every external shift. That is the point where the title begins to make sense, not as an idea, but as something experienced. You are no longer caring about what was never yours to carry. You are no longer holding on to variables that move independently of you. And in letting go of those, you do not become indifferent, you become focused, you become precise, you become free to act without the constant interference of imagined outcomes. That is the day you stop caring, and your life begins. Most people fear being alone. Yet solitude is not a weakness. It's a hidden superpower. History's greatest minds didn't find greatness in crowds. They found it in silence. When you look closely at the lives of the world's most influential thinkers, creators, and leaders, you'll see a pattern. Periods of deep solitude, of walking alone, of wrestling with their own thoughts. They didn't become exceptional because they followed the crowd. They became exceptional because, at some point, they broke away from it. They understood something that most people miss. That true strength, real creativity, and deep self-mastery are not born in noise, but in silence. In a world where being constantly busy, connected, and validated by others is considered normal, choosing to be alone and embracing that alone time is almost an act of rebellion. But it's a rebellion that can completely transform who you are. Today we're going to explore why solitude is not just important. It's necessary if you want to become unstoppable. We'll dive into the minds of three of history's most brilliant philosophers: Friedrich Nietzsche, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Arthur Schopenhauer. Each of them, in their own way, argued that solitude isn't something to run from. It's something to run toward. They believe that to truly know yourself, to think deeply, and to create anything of real value, you need to be able to step away from the noise of the world and sit quietly with yourself. Their ideas are not dry theories locked away in old books. They are practical tools, mindsets you can adopt today to change how you live, work, and think. Nietzsche taught us that to rise above the herd, to create your own path, you must be willing to walk alone. Emerson showed us that self-reliance isn't just about doing things yourself. It's about trusting your inner voice even when it goes against everyone else. And Schopenhauer warned that shallow socializing can actually weaken the mind, while solitude sharpens it. These are not just interesting ideas for philosophers, they are survival skills for modern life. In a world obsessed with constant connection, endless opinions, and 24/7 distraction, learning how to be content when you're alone is a real superpower. By the end of this video, you're going to have a deep understanding of why solitude is a critical ingredient in achieving anything truly meaningful. You'll see that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. Instead, it means gaining a level of independence and clarity that very few people ever achieve. You'll learn why people who can enjoy their own company are often the strongest, the most creative, and the most resilient. And even more importantly, you'll have practical strategies for how you can start embracing solitude today, not just in theory, but in your daily life. This isn't about abandoning the world, it's about learning to stand strong in it, unshaken, unafraid, and fully alive. So if you've ever felt afraid of being alone, or if you've ever wondered whether your time alone was wasted, stay with me. Because what you'll discover might just flip your whole perspective upside down, and open the door to a version of yourself you didn't even know existed. today, more than ever before, being alone is seen as something strange, even scary. Modern culture tends to paint solitude as a problem that needs fixing. If you're alone, people assume something must be wrong with you. They assume you must be sad, broken, or unwanted. Movies, television, advertisements, they all quietly suggest that a good life is one surrounded by friends, parties, constant interaction, and endless activity. If you're spending Friday night by yourself instead of posting pictures with a group of smiling people, you might feel like you're doing something wrong. Being constantly surrounded by others is often presented as proof that you're happy, successful, and popular. And being alone, it's seen as proof that you're failing somehow. But that idea is a lie, a dangerous lie that keeps millions of people stuck, disconnected not just from others, but from themselves. The truth is, solitude and loneliness are two very different things. Loneliness is a feeling. It's the painful sense that you are disconnected, that you want company but don't have it. Solitude, on the other hand, is a choice. It's the decision to spend time with yourself because you recognize that your own mind, your own soul, deserves your attention. But our culture has blurred the line between the two. We've been trained to believe that any time spent alone must automatically be lonely, and that loneliness must automatically be something bad. Because of this conditioning, most people panic at the idea of being alone. They rush to fill every quiet moment with noise, with distractions, with other people, even if those people don't truly understand them. And in doing so, they miss the incredible power that comes from learning to enjoy their own company. This fear of being alone is made even worse by the world we live in today. We are constantly overstimulated. Notifications light up our phones every few minutes. Social media apps are designed to keep us endlessly scrolling, chasing likes, comments, and validation. Every spare second we have, waiting in line, sitting in traffic, eating lunch, is filled with something: a song, a video, a text message, a notification. We are rarely, if ever, just sitting quietly with ourselves anymore. It's almost as if being alone with our own thoughts has become a lost art. But it's not an accident, it's by design. The modern world profits from keeping us distracted. The longer we stay plugged into the noise, the less time we have to reflect, to question, to grow. This overstimulation creates an addiction to external validation. Instead of asking ourselves how we feel about something, we look to others for their approval. Instead of trusting our own experiences, we wait to see how many likes we get or how many people agree with us. Slowly, without realizing it, we hand over the steering wheel of our lives to the opinions of the crowd. And the more we depend on external validation, the more terrifying solitude becomes. Because in solitude, there is no audience. There are no likes, no retweets, no quick dopamine hits from notifications. There is only you. And if you've spent your whole life avoiding yourself, that can be a scary thing to face. The American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson saw this problem coming a long time ago. In his famous essay Self-Reliance, he wrote, "Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members." What he meant is that society, even without meaning to, pressures individuals to conform, to think alike, to behave in ways that fit the group rather than honor their own unique spirit. And this pressure doesn't just happen through direct orders or rules, it happens silently through expectations, trends, and judgments. It whispers, "Stay with the crowd, don't stand alone, don't think differently." Emerson's warning is even more true today. The constant stream of media, peer pressure, and digital noise conspires, not by force but by habit, to make us distrust ourselves and fear the silence of solitude. Modern psychology backs up what Emerson and the great philosophers understood instinctively. Studies show that constant social interaction can actually weaken self-awareness and critical thinking. When we are always connected to others, our thoughts start to blend with the group's thoughts. Instead of deeply considering what we believe, We react based on what is popular or acceptable at the moment. Researchers have found that people who spend excessive time on social media report lower levels of authentic self-esteem and higher levels of anxiety and depression. Why? Because they're basing their sense of worth on external feedback rather than internal truth. And without solitude, real, intentional solitude, it becomes almost impossible to hear your own inner voice through all the noise. Moreover, another fascinating psychological phenomenon occurs: groupthink. This happens when people, wanting to maintain harmony or avoid conflict, stop voicing their own opinions and start thinking the way the group thinks. It's easier, it's safer, but it kills originality, it suffocates creativity. When everyone thinks the same way, nobody is truly thinking at all. Solitude protects you from this. Solitude gives you the space to wrestle with ideas, to form your own judgments, to challenge assumptions, not because someone told you to, but because you arrived at those conclusions yourself. If you think about it, every major leap forward in human thought, art, science, and philosophy has come from individuals who dared to step outside the crowd and think independently. Einstein, Thoreau, Nietzsche, Da Vinci, they all spent significant periods of their lives alone, cultivating ideas that didn't fit neatly into the culture of their time. If they had been constantly surrounded by noise and distractions, if they had needed constant approval, would they have dared to think differently? Probably not. True originality requires solitude. The tragedy of modern life is that we've been sold the idea that solitude is something to fear, when in fact it is something to treasure. Overcoming the fear of being alone isn't just a small act of personal development, it's revolutionary. In a world that trains you to depend on the opinions of others, choosing solitude, choosing to sit quietly with your own mind, to explore your own soul without judgment, is one of the bravest things you can do. It's an act of rebellion against a culture that wants you constantly distracted and constantly conforming. It's the first step toward true freedom. And the beauty of it is this: solitude doesn't require you to move to a cabin in the woods or abandon society entirely. It starts in small moments. Putting your phone down when you're waiting in line, taking a walk without earbuds, sitting quietly with your thoughts before bed instead of scrolling. Little by little, you reclaim your mind. Little by little, you remember what it feels like to truly be yourself, not as others see you, but as you are when no one is watching. If you can learn to be alone, truly alone, not anxiously alone, you unlock a kind of strength most people never experience. You stop needing the approval of others. You stop fearing their judgment. You start living according to your own values, your own truth, and that, as we'll continue to see, is the path to becoming truly unstoppable. When we talk about solitude as a hidden superpower, there's perhaps no philosopher more powerful to bring into the conversation than Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche understood, better than almost anyone, that if you truly want to live a life of greatness, a life that is your own, you have to be willing to step away from the crowd. You have to be willing to walk alone. In fact, one of his most famous ideas, the concept of the Übermensch, or the Overman, is built entirely on this foundation. The Overman is not just someone who is strong or successful. The Overman is a human being who has transcended the shallow values of society. Someone who doesn't just accept what is handed to them by culture, tradition, or popular opinion, but instead carves out their own values, their own path, and their own destiny. And Nietzsche believed that reaching this level of existence was impossible if you remained trapped inside the noise of the crowd. In one of his works, Nietzsche said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." It's a simple sentence, but it cuts deep. If you don't develop the discipline to rule over yourself, your own thoughts, your own desires, your own life, then someone else will happily do it for you. Society, institutions, trends, and even well-meaning friends and family, they will all pull you in directions you didn't consciously choose. Without realizing it, you'll spend your life chasing after goals that were never truly yours, trying to fit into molds that were never designed for you. And the only way to avoid this fate is through solitude. You have to step away from the constant noise long enough to hear your own voice clearly. You have to be willing to disobey the crowd in order to obey yourself. For Nietzsche, solitude is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the furnace where true individuality is forged. It's in solitude that you face the real you, stripped of the masks you wear for society, free from the expectations placed on you by others, and it's not always a comfortable experience. When you're truly alone, there's no one to blame for your failures, no one to impress with your talents, no one to distract you from your own doubts and weaknesses. You are forced to confront yourself honestly, and that confrontation can either break you or make you unbreakable. Nietzsche believed that this honest confrontation was essential. Only by facing yourself without illusions could you ever hope to become something greater. Nietzsche didn't just talk about solitude, he lived it. Throughout his life, he made deliberate choices to separate himself from mainstream society. He was not interested in fame, popularity, or approval. In fact, most of his ideas were either ignored or ridiculed during his lifetime. Nietzsche spent long periods living in relative isolation in small towns in Switzerland and Italy. He preferred long, solitary walks through the mountains over dinner parties or lectures. He often wrote that he needed the pure, raw silence of nature to think deeply, to create his works, and to maintain his mental clarity. His books, such as Thus Spoke Zarathustra, were not written in crowded coffee houses or busy lecture halls. They were born in solitude, carved out of the deep, silent conversations he had with himself while walking alone through the Swiss Alps. This self-imposed exile was not easy. Nietzsche struggled with poor health, loneliness, and the mental strain that comes from living outside the comfort of societal approval. But he understood that greatness has a price. If you want to think differently, you have to live differently. If you want to be free, you have to accept the burden of freedom. And that burden often includes being misunderstood, criticized, and even abandoned by others. Nietzsche's life is a testament to this reality. The path to becoming unstoppable is often a lonely one, but it's the only path that leads to real mastery of yourself and your life. One of the most powerful things Nietzsche teaches us is that solitude is not about hating others or rejecting society completely. It's about reaching a point where your sense of self is strong enough that you can engage with society on your own terms. You don't hide from the world. You step into it fully, but without being enslaved by it. You're no longer desperate for approval. You're no longer crushed by criticism. You are anchored in something deeper, your own self-defined values. And this kind of strength can only be built in solitude, in the hard, quiet moments when you have no one to impress, no one to lean on, no one to tell you what to do. Nietzsche also warned against what he called the herd mentality, the natural human instinct to think, feel, and act like the group around you. He believed that most people live and die as part of the herd, never questioning whether the values they live by are truly their own. They simply absorb the beliefs of their culture and follow the crowd because it's easier, it's safer, it's more comfortable. But comfort was never Nietzsche's goal. His goal was transformation, and transformation requires pain, struggle, and solitude. If you want to rise above the herd, if you want to become the creator of your own destiny, you must first be willing to walk away from the herd. You must have the courage to endure the temporary discomfort of isolation in order to achieve the permanent freedom of self-mastery. The beauty of Nietzsche's message is that solitude isn't just for philosophers, writers, or artists. It's for anyone who wants to live a life of real meaning. You don't have to disappear into the mountains for years. You don't have to reject everyone you know. You simply have to create enough space in your life where your own mind, your own soul, gets to speak clearly and powerfully. It could be as simple as an hour each morning spent reading, thinking, journaling, or walking alone without distractions. It could be turning off your phone in the evenings to sit quietly with your own thoughts. It's about learning to be your own companion, not because you hate people, but because you recognize that your growth, your strength, your greatness begins with you. In the end, Nietzsche believed that the path to becoming the overman, the highest version of yourself, is a path that must pass through solitude, not once, not temporarily, but consistently. Greatness isn't built in crowds. It's built in the quiet spaces where you wrestle with yourself, confront your fears, question your beliefs, and forge your own way forward. Solitude is the crucible where real inner strength is forged. And though it may sometimes feel lonely, it is also where the deepest, most lasting kind of power is born. The power to live life on your own terms, fully awake, fully alive, and completely free. When we think about the power of solitude, we can't ignore Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the greatest American philosophers and essayists. Emerson's philosophy of self-reliance is all about the radical idea that your intuition, your inner voice, is more trustworthy than the opinions of the world around you. At a time when people were already rushing to conform, to fit into neatly defined social boxes, Emerson stood up and said, "No. Trust yourself first." He believed that deep inside every individual there's a truth that's purer, wiser, and more powerful than anything society can offer. But the only way to hear it is to create space for it, and that space, once again, is solitude. In his famous essay, Self-Reliance, Emerson wrote, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself." It's a short sentence, but it carries a massive truth. No amount of social approval, wealth, relationships, or external success can give you real peace if you're disconnected from your true self. You can surround yourself with hundreds of people, be loved by millions, and still feel empty inside if you're living according to someone else's standards. Real peace, the kind that stays with you through every season of life, only comes when you trust your own mind, when you listen to your own intuition, and when you live a life that is true to who you are, not who the world tells you to be. But trusting yourself isn't easy. From a young age, we're trained to seek approval. We learn to shape our behavior based on what gets praised and what gets punished. Over time, if we're not careful, our inner voice, that small, quiet voice that knows what we truly want and believe, gets drowned out by the louder voices of teachers, parents, media, and peers. We lose touch with what we genuinely feel and start living a second-hand life, a life built from borrowed opinions and second-guessed decisions. Emerson understood this deeply, and he knew that to reclaim your life, you had to return to solitude, to silence, where your true voice could finally be heard again. Solitude is not about disconnecting from society forever. Emerson didn't live as a hermit. He spoke to people, he gave lectures, he engaged with the world. But he approached the world from a position of inner clarity. He was rooted in himself first. Being alone, in Emerson's philosophy, wasn't about hating people or rejecting human connection. It was about making sure that when you did connect with others, you weren't just echoing their thoughts or pretending to be something you're not. Solitude wasn't isolation for Emerson. It was preparation. It was about finding your center so that when you stepped into society, you could engage authentically, powerfully, and without fear of losing yourself in the crowd. Emerson believed that every great idea, every true innovation, every genuine movement forward in the world began with an individual who dared to trust their own mind, even when everyone else thought they were wrong. It's easy to go along with the crowd. It's easy to believe what everyone else believes. It's hard to stand up and say, I see things differently, especially when no one else agrees. But that's exactly what self-reliance demands. It demands that you build a strong enough relationship with your own mind that you can walk through the world without constantly looking over your shoulder, without constantly needing validation from others. And that strength, that deep, unshakable self-trust, is built in solitude. Imagine for a moment if every decision you made came from your own deep understanding, not from fear of judgment, not from pressure to conform. Imagine if you trusted yourself enough to choose your path, even when everyone else was walking a different road. That kind of inner freedom is rare, but it's possible. Emerson believed it was the highest kind of freedom a human being could achieve. But like anything valuable, it doesn't come easily. It requires practice. It requires time alone, listening to your own doubts, your own dreams, your own conscience, and learning to distinguish your real voice from the thousands of other voices you've absorbed over the years. In today's world, trusting yourself is harder than ever. We are bombarded with opinions, advice, and noise from the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep. Algorithms tell us what to think. Trending topics tell us what to care about. Likes and shares tell us what's worthy of attention. In this environment, finding your own authentic vision isn't just challenging, it's revolutionary. Taking time to be alone, to be silent, to reflect is an act of self-preservation. It's a way of protecting the most valuable thing you have, your mind. But solitude isn't just about protection, it's about creation. In solitude, your imagination wakes up. New ideas start to form. Questions that you've been avoiding begin to surface. You start to realize what truly matters to you. Not what you've been told should matter, but what actually stirs your heart. You reconnect with passions you might have forgotten. You start seeing paths you didn't notice before because you were too busy trying to keep up with everyone else. Solitude is the soil where your true vision can grow. And when you do step back into society, because eventually you will, you bring something precious with you: authenticity. You're not just reacting to the world anymore. You're contributing something original, something real, something deeply yours. Emerson's dream was not a world where everyone lived separately in cabins. His dream was a world where individuals, strong in themselves, came together not as mindless followers, but as true individuals. Sharing, building, creating from a place of genuine strength. A society of self-reliant individuals, each bringing their own light, rather than reflecting someone else's. The beautiful thing about self-reliance is that it doesn't require you to be perfect. Emerson wasn't talking about arrogance or stubbornness. He was talking about honest self-trust, the willingness to listen deeply to yourself, to make mistakes, to learn, and to keep moving forward without being crushed by the fear of disapproval. He was talking about living a life that is alive, vibrant, and real, not one that is secondhand or borrowed. In the end, self-reliance is about freedom, the freedom to be who you are, not who the world demands you to be. And that freedom begins in solitude. It begins when you have the courage to sit quietly with yourself, to listen without judgment, and to trust what you hear. It begins when you realize that the peace you've been chasing out in the world has been within you all along, waiting patiently for you to return to it. So as we move forward in this journey, remember Emerson's challenge. Dare to trust yourself. Dare to spend time alone. Dare to listen to the voice inside you that already knows the way, even if no one else around you sees it yet. Because in that voice lies your greatest strength, your clearest vision, and your truest peace. When we talk about solitude as a powerful tool for growth, it's impossible to ignore Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brilliant and most brutally honest philosophers in history. Schopenhauer had a very clear, very uncompromising view of solitude. He believed that true genius needs solitude like the body needs air. Without it, the mind gets polluted. Without it, original thought becomes almost impossible. In Schopenhauer's eyes, solitude wasn't just a nice thing to have once in a while. It was absolutely necessary if a person wanted to reach their highest potential. He knew that the deepest thoughts, the most profound insights, and the boldest ideas are born not in noisy rooms filled with shallow conversation, but in the quiet moments when a person stands alone with their own mind. One of Schopenhauer's most famous quotes captures his belief perfectly. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. In those few words, he reveals a profound truth. When we are constantly surrounded by other people, constantly exposed to their expectations, their judgments, their opinions, we naturally, almost automatically, start to adjust ourselves to fit. It doesn't happen because we're weak or fake. It happens because human beings are wired for social survival. We sense what others want from us, and without even thinking about it, we often bend ourselves to meet those unspoken demands. Over time, if we're not careful, we lose touch with who we really are. We forget what we truly think and feel. We become, little by little, reflections of the crowd instead of reflections of our true selves. Schopenhauer believed that this loss of authenticity was the death of genius. Original thought, the kind of thought that changes the world, can only happen when you are free from the pressures and expectations of the crowd. And the only way to be free from those pressures is to create distance, to step back, to be alone. In solitude, you can finally think thoughts that are yours, not recycled from the people around you. You can finally hear your own voice without it being drowned out by the endless noise of society. You can finally create something new, something that couldn't exist if you were constantly worrying about fitting in. But solitude isn't comfortable for everyone, and Schopenhauer was brutally honest about this too. He believed that mediocre minds fear solitude while great minds crave it. Mediocre minds, he said, are dependent on the crowd. They rely on constant conversation, constant entertainment, constant validation to keep themselves distracted from the uncomfortable task of facing their own thoughts. They fear silence because silence reveals the emptiness they have been trying to hide. Great minds, on the other hand, are not afraid of silence. They welcome it. They understand that solitude isn't a punishment, it's a gift. It's a rare and sacred opportunity to go deeper, to discover things that can only be found when you are completely alone. In today's world, this message is more important than ever. Shallow socialization is everywhere. We are constantly bombarded with opportunities to interact with others. But how deep are those interactions, really? A quick scroll through social media, a comment here, a like there, a brief conversation about the latest trend. These things give the illusion of connection, but they often leave us feeling emptier than before. They fill our minds with other people's opinions, other people's priorities, other people's distractions, and in the process, they drown out the deeper questions, the deeper dreams, the deeper creativity that lives within us. Schopenhauer warned against this kind of shallow existence. He believed that constantly seeking the company of others, constantly filling your mind with surface-level chatter, was dangerous, not because people are bad, but because the human mind needs quiet to grow. Just like a plant needs stillness and time to sink its roots deep into the earth, a mind needs stillness and solitude to grow deep, original thoughts. Without solitude, our thoughts remain shallow, reactive, and borrowed. With solitude, we have the chance to discover ideas that are truly our own. It's important to understand that Schopenhauer wasn't saying that human connection is worthless. He wasn't saying we should live our lives in total isolation. He was saying that if you want to bring something truly valuable into the world, whether it's a book, a business, a philosophy, a work of art, or simply a life lived with real integrity, you must spend time apart from the noise. You must cultivate your inner world before you can contribute anything meaningful to the outer world. Solitude isn't about rejecting people, it's about preparing yourself to offer something real when you do engage with them. Think about the greatest creators, thinkers, and leaders in history. How many of them spent long periods in solitude? Leonardo da Vinci spent countless hours alone sketching and thinking. Beethoven often wandered into the forest alone, letting the rhythms of nature inspire his music. Nikola Tesla, one of the most brilliant inventors in history, emphasized that being alone was critical for his creativity. These individuals didn't fear solitude. They embraced it because they understood that their best ideas needed room to breathe, room to unfold without interruption. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to be a world-famous genius to benefit from solitude. Anyone can tap into the creative, clarifying power of being alone. You don't need to run away from the world completely. You just need to create spaces in your life where you can hear your own thoughts clearly, where you can think without interruption, where you can explore ideas without worrying about how they'll be judged. Even small pockets of solitude, a quiet morning walk, an hour without your phone, a weekend afternoon spent journaling instead of scrolling, can create the space you need for deeper thinking and greater creativity. Solitude gives you the freedom to think your own thoughts, dream your own dreams, and build your own vision for your life. It protects you from being swept away by the latest trends or trapped in the shallow conversations that fill so much of modern life. It allows you to ask the big questions. Who am I really? What do I truly believe? What do I want to create, to contribute, to stand for? These are questions that can't be answered in a crowded room or through endless notifications. They can only be answered in the quiet, sacred space of solitude. Schopenhauer's message is clear. If you want to live deeply, if you want to think clearly, if you want to create something original and meaningful, you must embrace solitude, not fearfully, not resentfully, but joyfully, as a necessary part of your growth. Solitude is not a prison, it's a sanctuary. It's the place where your truest, strongest, most brilliant self has the chance to emerge. One of the greatest misunderstandings about solitude is that it's simply an emotional experience, that being alone is just about whether you feel good or bad, happy or sad. But if you look deeper, you realize that solitude is not just emotional, it's a psychological training ground. It's a place where real resilience is built, where mental toughness is forged. In solitude, without distractions, without external validation, without anyone to blame or depend on, you're finally faced with yourself, with all your fears, doubts, insecurities, and hidden weaknesses. And it's there, in that uncomfortable place, that real strength has the chance to grow. When you're alone, you can't hide behind excuses. You can't distract yourself with constant noise. You can't shift responsibility to others. The conversations you have are with yourself. The battles you fight are internal, and that is exactly why solitude is so powerful. It forces you to develop the muscles of courage, patience, endurance, and self-trust, not by accident, but by deliberate practice. Mental toughness isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And like building physical strength, it requires resistance, struggle, and effort. Solitude provides the perfect environment for this kind of training because it strips away all the soft comforts and easy distractions we usually use to escape discomfort. One of the most powerful examples of finding strength in solitude comes from Viktor Frankl, the the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. Frankl endured years in Nazi concentration camps, separated from his family, stripped of his dignity, and reduced to the barest existence. Yet even in those horrific conditions, perhaps the ultimate form of forced isolation and suffering, Frankl discovered a deep, unbreakable truth. Even when everything else is taken from you, you still have the power to choose your response. You still have the freedom to find meaning. Frankl realized that life is not primarily about seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. It's about finding purpose. And often, that sense of purpose emerges most clearly when you are alone with your suffering, without distractions to numb you. In his book Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This is the essence of solitude as a training ground for toughness. When you are alone and you realize that you cannot immediately change your external circumstances, when you can't just run away, distract yourself, or rely on someone else to fix it, you are challenged, perhaps for the first time, to truly change yourself. To face your fears, confront your pain, and forge a new kind of strength from the inside out. This is not something that happens when life is easy or when you're surrounded by comfort. It happens in the crucible of solitude." In contrast to this powerful reality, modern culture often pushes the myth that constant networking is the key to success. We are told that the more people you know, the more social events you attend, the more constantly connected you are, the better your life will be. And of course, building relationships is important. Human beings are social creatures. But when networking becomes a way to escape self-development, when it becomes an endless chase for validation, status, and distraction, it becomes dangerous. Knowing thousands of people won't help you if you don't know yourself. Being surrounded by crowds won't save you if you are hollow inside. True success, the kind that actually fulfills you rather than just impressing others, is built first in solitude, not in the crowd. Deep personal development doesn't happen at networking events. It happens in the quiet spaces when you're alone, wrestling with yourself. It happens when you sit down and ask yourself hard questions. Who am I really? What do I believe? What do I want my life to stand for? It happens when you face your fears without numbing them, when you endure boredom without desperately seeking entertainment, when you experience failure and instead of covering it up, you sit with it, learn from it, and become stronger. These moments don't make for flashy Instagram posts. They don't always come with quick rewards, but they are the foundation of lasting strength, confidence, and resilience. Learning to be your own company and actually enjoying it is like training a muscle. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, awkward, even painful. You might experience boredom, restlessness, self-doubt. You might be tempted to reach for your phone, to turn on some noise, to escape the quiet. But if you can resist that impulse, even for a little while, you start to discover something incredible. You realize that your own mind is far richer than you thought. You realize that you are capable of thinking deeper thoughts, feeling deeper emotions, and experiencing a richer kind of life when you give yourself the space to grow without interruption. At first, solitude might reveal your weaknesses, your impatience, your fear, your insecurity, but over time, it strengthens you. You become more patient because you learn to sit with yourself. You become more courageous because you face your fears head on. You become more self-sufficient because you stop relying on constant external stimulation to feel alive. Just like lifting weights makes your muscles sore before it makes them strong, being alone might make you uncomfortable before it makes you powerful. But if you keep training, if you keep showing up, the transformation is inevitable. And here's the beautiful part. Once you've developed real inner toughness through solitude, life gets easier in ways you might not expect. Criticism hurts less because you no longer need everyone's approval. Failure scares you less because you trust your ability to recover. Loneliness doesn't crush you because you know how to enjoy your own company. You stop chasing after shallow pleasures and start building a deeper kind of happiness, one that comes from within and can't be taken away by external circumstances. Ultimately, solitude trains you not just to survive hardship, but to thrive in it. It prepares you to handle the ups and downs of life with grace, courage, and resilience. It teaches you that you are enough, that you don't need constant affirmation from others to be valuable, that you don't need constant noise to feel alive. You realize that true strength isn't about never feeling fear or doubt. It's about being able to walk through fear and doubt without losing yourself. Solitude is not accidental loneliness, it's deliberate training. It's choosing again and again to face yourself fully, to trust yourself deeply, and to build a life that is anchored in inner strength rather than outer appearances. It's not about rejecting the world, but about preparing yourself to step into the world with a strength that comes from within, a strength that doesn't depend on how many people like you, praise you, or agree with you. In solitude, you don't just find your fears, you find your freedom. You don't just face your doubts, you build your destiny. You realize that everything you thought you needed from the outside world, approval, comfort, distraction, was never the source of real strength. The source of real strength has always been inside you, waiting patiently for you to claim it. After everything we've talked about, the power of solitude to build strength, creativity, resilience, and authenticity, it's natural to ask, how do I actually begin? How do you make solitude a real living part of your daily life? Especially when you're used to the constant buzz of notifications, conversations, and distractions. The answer is, you start small. You start in ways that feel manageable, even a little bit playful. You don't have to retreat into the woods for a year or disconnect from everyone you love. You just have to create little pockets of silence, moments of space where your mind and soul can breathe. One of the easiest and most powerful ways to begin is through something I like to call micro-solitude. Micro-solitude means carving out small, deliberate periods of quiet during your day. Moments when you're completely alone, without external noise or digital distractions. It could be as simple as taking a walk without your phone. No music, no podcasts, no texting while you stroll, just you, your steps, your breath, and your thoughts. At first it might feel strange, your mind might race, you might feel uncomfortable, but with time you'll notice something amazing. Your thoughts begin to slow down. Your mind starts to stretch and relax, like a muscle that's finally getting oxygen after being cramped. You can also create micro-solitude by starting your morning silently. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone, spend the first 15 or 30 minutes just being. Make a cup of coffee or tea. Sit by a window, watch the sunrise. Let your mind wake up naturally without being flooded with headlines, emails, or social media updates. These silent mornings act like a mental reset button. They give you clarity before the noise of the day invades your mind. Another simple but powerful practice is setting aside one no social media day each week. Pick a day, maybe Sunday, maybe Wednesday, and commit to staying completely off social media. No Instagram, no TikTok, no Twitter. Instead, use that time to be with yourself, to read, to reflect, to simply exist without constantly consuming. Once you're comfortable with these smaller practices, you can start building a deeper solitude practice, something more intentional and transformative. One of the most effective ways is through journaling. Journaling isn't just about recording what happened during your day. It's about creating a safe space where you can explore your own thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your confusions. It's a conversation with yourself. and over time it becomes a mirror, showing you patterns in your thinking, helping you make sense of emotions that otherwise stay tangled and hidden. You don't have to write perfectly. You don't even have to make complete sentences. Just write whatever is real, whatever is alive inside you. Deep reflection is another cornerstone of embracing solitude. Instead of filling every quiet moment with tasks or entertainment, sit with big questions. Ask yourself things like, what truly matters to me? What am I avoiding in my life? What would I do if no one else's opinion mattered? You don't have to have perfect answers. The act of asking is powerful enough. Reflection, like solitude itself, doesn't demand immediate results. It simply invites you to dig deeper, to live more consciously. Philosophical reading can also be an incredible companion during your solitude practice. But not reading for information alone, reading to spark inner dialogue. Pick books that challenge you, that provoke you to think about life, meaning, purpose. Read a few pages, then close the book and sit with what you've read. Let the ideas ferment inside you. Ask yourself, do I agree? Do I disagree? Why? Great philosophical works aren't just meant to be understood, they're meant to be wrestled with. They are springboards into your own mind. Another practical and deeply transformative habit is developing a practice of self-dialogue. This means literally talking to yourself like you would to a close friend, not in a judgmental or critical way, but with curiosity and compassion. When you're faced with a difficult decision, ask yourself, what do I really want? What am I afraid of? What's holding me back? Speak out loud if you want, or write it down. What matters is that you're engaging directly with yourself, treating your own mind and emotions with respect instead of brushing them aside or drowning them out with noise. Of course, no discussion of solitude would be complete without addressing the feeling of loneliness. Sometimes, when we start spending more time alone, loneliness surfaces, and that can be scary. It's important to understand that feeling lonely and being alone are not the same thing. Feeling lonely usually means you are disconnected from meaning, from purpose, from your own sense of belonging, not necessarily from other people. You can be surrounded by a crowd and still feel lonelier than ever. True solitude, when practiced intentionally, actually reduces loneliness because it reconnects you to yourself. It fills the gap that no amount of external connection can ever fully fill. One way to think about this is to practice emotional alchemy, turning the raw material of loneliness into gold. Instead of running from lonely feelings, face them, sit with them, ask, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Maybe it's pointing out areas where you've been neglecting your own inner life. Maybe it's inviting you to create deeper connections, not just with others, but with yourself. Over time, the loneliness transforms. It becomes solitude. It becomes strength. Here are some simple, actionable steps you can start practicing today. Take a 30-minute solo walk every day. Leave your phone at home or keep it on airplane mode. Walk without a destination. Just observe, think, dream. Let your mind breathe. Commit to one no social media day per week. Use that day to read, to write, to think, to simply be. Notice how your mind feels different when it's not constantly bombarded. Schedule regular silent retreats or nature trips. You don't have to spend a month in the mountains. Even a single afternoon at a quiet park, sitting by a river, or hiking a trail alone can have a powerful effect on your mind. Nature naturally quiets the noise inside us. Create a quiet morning ritual. Start your day with 20-30 minutes of silence. No phone, no computer, no TV. Just you, your breath, and your thoughts. This simple habit can completely shift the energy of your day. Keep a self-dialogue journal. Ask yourself one hard question every day and write about it. Over time, you'll see yourself becoming clearer, stronger, and more centered. Practice sit and stare time. Literally set a timer for 10 minutes, sit somewhere quietly, and just stare at a tree, at the sky, at a blank wall. Let your mind settle. Let yourself be bored. Boredom is often the doorway to deeper thought. Remember, solitude is not something you have to earn. It's not a punishment you have to endure. It's a gift you can choose to open every day, a gift that reconnects you to your deepest self. Start small, stay consistent, trust the process. Over time, you will discover that the person you find in solitude isn't someone to be feared. It's someone to be celebrated. It's you, stronger, wiser, freer than you ever imagined. As we come to the end of this journey, I want you to remember something essential. Solitude is not just freedom from others, it's freedom for yourself. It's not about cutting yourself off from the world or rejecting connection. It's about creating a space where your soul can breathe without limits. It's about learning to stand fully in your own presence without needing the constant approval, distraction, or company of others to feel whole. In a world that constantly demands your attention, that constantly pulls at you to conform, perform, and belong, solitude is a revolutionary act. It's a return to your own mind, your own heart, your own sense of being. It's reclaiming the parts of yourself that get buried under noise and pressure. And in that quiet space, you rediscover a kind of freedom that nothing and no one can take away. The freedom to think your own thoughts, to create your own meaning, to live your own truth. I want to leave you with a final challenge, a real one, something you can act on today. Can you spend a full day without your phone? Without social media, without texting, without seeking any external validation, and simply be at peace with yourself? No scrolling, no distractions, just you and your mind, just you and your life. It might sound easy, it might sound terrifying, but if you try it, really try it, you'll discover just how powerful you truly are when you stop looking outward for strength and start finding it within. Every great individual in history, every thinker, every artist, every leader was willing to stand alone when necessary. They didn't wait for the crowd to approve before they dared to think differently, to create boldly, to live authentically. They understood that true greatness is not found in the noise of popularity. It's forged in the silence of solitude. As Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "The great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude." This is the ultimate test, not to run away from the world, but to remain centered, true and free within it. To move through life not desperately needing the crowd, but offering your strength to it, because you are already whole. So today I invite you, even if it's just for 10 minutes, to start practicing solitude. Take a quiet walk, sit silently by yourself, journal your thoughts. Watch the sunset without trying to capture it for social media. Create a small island of peace inside your busy day. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be real. Because the more you practice standing alone, the more you'll discover that you were never truly alone. You were simply waiting to meet your strongest, truest self.